I am making a first-person shooter slash base building management game inspired by some of the industry giants such as Metro Exodus, Nier Automata and Five Nights at Freddy's. What could go wrong? A lot actually, let's find out. Alright, so this week I wanted to get the core of the game into a playable state, you know? If you want to make a game, then you have to make, a game. So it was time to work on some gameplay loops. This week I started with a block out of a bunker that you'll be spending most of your time inside of. All of your time most likely. I put up some mannequins around the level so that I could estimate the sizes and distances. This blockout took about an hour to get right. If you watched any of my previous devlogs, you might have noticed that my style of development can best be described as style is all that matters. I even gave a goddamn text box project some style. So, adding a style to the project was important for me so I could better see what the game actually is. This took about one day filled with a lot of questionable results, but in the end I landed on this. Next up, and this is quite an important part of any good shooter game, the AI. I didn't want the AI to be very complex, so things like switching covers, flanking the player or any complicated strategies had to go. Or I guess just not come since I didn't work on them actually. They wouldn't fit into this type of game, and it was absolutely not because I didn't want to bother with developing more complex AI. Shut up. So I took this process step by step. All the AI needs to do is to move to its designated location, aim at the player, shoot. The AI will most likely need some complexity and unique behaviors later, but for the basic gameplay loop, good enough. I am spawning the AI from a custom spawner actor that I created. The way it works is that you give it a list of vectors that function as sort of AI move to locations or points. Before spawning an AI, I look at all the available spawn points and ignore the ones that another AI is occupying. Then I select one randomly and bam! We spawn a character. I wanted more control over all the AIs from a single actor, so I created an enemy manager. An actor that controls all the spawn points and selects which ones should spawn an enemy. I did this because I wanted a more complex way for the enemies to spawn. This means controlling their spawn amount. I can have bigger and smaller waves of enemies and have them be two distinct things. I can spawn fewer tougher enemies rather than a lot of weak enemies and so on. This allows me to program more complex ways of spawning AIs. By the way, if you want more details on a system like this, then I recommend checking up on a game called Risk of Rain. That guy Glen explains very well how that game achieves something similar. I will leave a link for you in the description. Then I found another issue. When the AI spawned, it would immediately aim at the player. This means that an enemy could very well kill you before you've even seen them, and well, we want to keep those keyboards in one piece now, don't we? So I implemented this aiming system for the AI where the gun rotates itself towards the AI's target. In most cases, the target is the player. So to make sure that AI is not aiming at the player at the start, I generate some offset vector that I then add onto the player's location vector. The weapon is then actually aiming at this offset instead of the actual player's position. Once the AI stops moving, this offset is then gradually shrunk to something like 5 to 10% of its original size. I did this to make sure that all the weapons weren't aiming at a single spot at the end, because that just looked weird. The lasers coming from the weapon actually help a lot to the players since they can now see exactly where the AI's weapon is aiming. I think it's called telegraphing or something. And then there's shooting. The AI just presses the weapon's trigger at random intervals with nothing magical to it. All the guns in the game come from a single weapon class that I use for both AI and the player, so this was pretty easy to implement. I wanted to improve the AI a little bit, so I added reloading and stun mechanics to enemies. The AI could sometimes, how should I put this, overwhelm the player. So I just limited the number of enemies firing at once, and there we go, AI done. At least for now. Let's sum up what we have so far. We have a basic level, cell shading, we have some enemies, and a wave system that can go on to infinity. God damn, this was like 3 days of work and we already have a game on our hands. So now we can shoot AI guys, they can shoot back, and god damn, this is actually boring as f. All I do is shoot, wait for a wave to spawn, and shoot them as well. Rinse and repeat. Too much water, 4 out of 10. Thank you. To make things more interesting, I took an inspiration from an unexpected source for a first-person shooter war game. Five Nights at Freddy's. A small indie darling that some of you may have heard of. The game consists of sitting in one place, looking at cameras, this shit. Oh, and don't forget the hippo philosopher. Very important.
My friend, you have met a terrible terrible demise. But, I don't feel too bad about it. After all, if it weren't from me, it would have just been from someone else, I guess what I'm trying to say is life goes on. Well, for everyone else, life goes on, not for you. You're dead. But that's neither here nor there.
Not really much depth here, huh? I can see why none of you have heard about it. Except for one small detail that I forgot. That's right, buttons. Lots of buttons. It's impossible to win the game without them. They add a new layer of management and depth to the simplistic gameplay. And then there's the hippo philosopher. This guy, goddamn. Anyway, buttons. Buttons are now a feature. And let me tell you, these buttons can handle everything. From buttons that you need to push, buttons that you need to hold, buttons that you need to hold and reset once you release them, cooldowns and so much more. So I wanted these buttons to be actually useful during gameplay. And so the first thing I added was a shield. Right now, not very useful. Since you can't actually take any damage, the shield doesn't really help. But once I introduce the health system for a player, this thing will become very important. Might as well explain how it works once we cross that bridge, huh? Good. And here's where things went south. As I did all this stuff, only two things remained that I didn't know how to tackle, and so I procrastinated the shit. I started working on this broken visor kind of shader. I was inspired by the Lone Wolf mission, if you know, you know. So I worked on this for a whole goddamn day and then I just lay in bed, burned out. Now this isn't the first time that I made a mistake like this. I'm something of a crippling failure myself. I didn't know what to do. This was our first big experience. Shit happens. So I went ahead and took a little break from the development for a day. While I was figuring out what I could improve, Hormozi released this talk about getting things done. After watching it, I realized what went wrong, and so I'll leave the talk in the description. Go see it for yourself. I think that you'll enjoy it and find it useful. It's like 40 minutes long and entertaining for the whole time. In short, just divide your tasks until you understand exactly what you should do instead of brute forcing your way through one massive task. Man was not made for one large task, but rather for many little ones.